Let's talk about California today. California, the biggest wine producing country or county or whatever you want to know in the US, and quite important. So if somebody talks about wine from the US, almost everybody is talking about California. So this is the importance and shows already the size of business they are doing in California with wine. So let's have a look on California. Looking on the map, of course, it's on the western side of the US, of America. It borders to the Pacific Sea, to the Pacific Ocean, and it's spread from, let's say, from quite long, from the north to the south, from San Francisco to Los Angeles, going down all the way. This is considered to be California wine growing region. We've got the split in North Coast, Central Coast, and South Coast as well. And this is then split further into different other regions within California. More inland is Sierra Foothills, for example, and really, really important, the Central Valley. The Central Valley is important for mass wine production, bulk wine production, high volume production with economy of sales. This is the region where, for example, this 2-pack jug wine is coming from. So a wine selling for $2 in the stores, and the owner is still making 50% of profit on these wines coming from the Central Valley. So you get an imagination how big this is and how nicely to produce wines there. I want to focus within California on 2 sub-regions. The one is called Napa Valley, and the other one is the Sonoma County. So they are neighbors. They even have overlapping wine growing areas, like Carneros, AVA. This is the naming for a DO or DOC within California. And we will talk about these 2 ones later on. But first of all, California as such, it's America's biggest producer. America itself is the 4th leading wine producer in terms of volume, what they are producing. And California makes 81% out of all US wine they are doing. So it's really important. 4,200 bonded wineries. Bonded is the term for financially and tax-wise listed companies. So 4,200 bonded wineries, mainly family-owned business. Of course, we always talk about the big ones like Castella family and so on and so on. But most of the wineries are still family-owned business, and California is producing 242 million cases. So it's a 12 bottle case and 9 liter case. This is what they are always counting. And in terms of sales, of course, you can imagine it's the most important site within the US. The export revenue, $1.4 billion. This equals to 95% from the US wine exports. So let's say almost all of the export from the US is coming from California. The most important export countries are Canada, UK, and the European Union. We talk about roughly 5,900 wine growers, and within California, 141 American viticultural areas, AVA. I'll explain later on what that means. And then more than 110 grapes are grown. The key facts, 256,000 hectares, or 57 almost, thousand hectares, 25 million hectoliters of wine produced. So it's huge. It's really, really huge. Annual rainfall, depending where you are, if you're close to the Pacific, it's 1,300. If you're more inland, it's the 500 millimeters. Months of harvest, August and September. Principal hazards, fan leaf degradation, for example, corky bark, for example, oitepa disease, ESCA. So these are a little bit different things than we have here in the Europe. all looked after by the University of Davis, based in California, one of the biggest wine universities. They're doing a lot of research work on rootstocks, on varieties, on viticulture practices, sustainability, as California is very much driven from sustainability. There's even an own program, environmental friendly farming, for example. All this is existing in California, looking there. So, going down a little bit in the regions. As said, 141 AVAs, large wine regions, North Coast, Central Coast, South Coast, and the Central Valley, where the most important one is the North Coast. The North Coast extends from San Francisco up to the north and includes Napa and Sonoma. So what this Central Coast accounts for more than 75% of all the wine. And how is this geographically done? So either the appellation is defined by a political boundary, or it's defined by a federally recognized growing region called AVA. California, I said, from San Francisco down to LA, so 1,300 kilometers of coastline, quite diverse in terms of climate, quite diverse in types of number of varieties they have there. Well known, especially the Sonoma, for cool climate, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And from history point of view, we only start 1700. So it's not that huge history like in Europe. Looking on the on the Napa AVA, Napa Valley, there's a Napa County existing as well. The Napa Valley, there's the Mayakama Mountains. It's exactly between the Sonoma Valley, directly at the Pacific, and the Napa Valley. In the middle is the Mayakama Mountains, and this is a really climate border. So we're talking about a dry climate there, diversity of microclimates within the subzones in Napa Valley. And according to Winkler, I will explain later on, it's the climate zone 2. Soil, everything what you can expect from a soil. Yeah. However, Napa is really important in terms of quality. They just reflect 4% of all the Californian wine, like Sonoma Valley does. So Sonoma and Napa together do less than 10% of the Californian wine. We talk about 18,000 hectares and varieties, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet, Merlot, Syrah, all these well-known Pinot Noirs from this region. It was the first AVA in California back in 1981. It stretches 50 kilometers from almost San Francisco up to the north and just a few kilometers wide. The most famous vineyard is called Tocalón, the Beauty, just behind the Mondavi winery, by the way. Irrigation is needed as there's a quite low rain rate in this area. Spring frost can be a challenge. And famous is the Napa Valley train. So when you're there for tourism purposes, jump on the train. It's a real train, and you can go along the Napa Valley Road, and visiting one winery after each other. And two wines, the Chateau Montelena Chardonnay and the Stags Leap Winery Cellars Cabernet Sauvignon, vintage 1973, they brought Napa on the international table. I will talk about this later on. On the other side, Sonoma, which is directly to the Pacific and bordered by the Mayakama Mountains to the Napa Valley. The climate is warm in the north, cool in the south, very much influenced from the Pacific. Therefore, fungal diseases quite often a problem in there. The soil in the Sonoma Valley, it's loam soil. Then in the clear, cool climate area, Russian River Valley, quite alluvial along the Russian River, and going down to volcanic soils in the south, close to San Francisco. 1812, the first vines were planted. We're talking about 24,000 hectares, so almost double the size, but it's a county and not the valley, and including 19 AVAs. The varieties are the same like in Napa Valley. However, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir more dominant. Sonoma grows, by the way, Sonoma grows more Pinot Noir than any other country in the state. The growth rate on Sonoma is quite interesting. Back in 1920, we've got 256 wineries and 8,900 hectares in production. Yeah, so this has tripled or even more since 1920. Since 1975, the wine labels and the appellations are regulated. And as said before, Sonoma Valley is known to be the cool climate area of California for crisp white wines and refreshing red wines based on Pinot Noir. By the way, the move is sideways back in 2004. Have a look on it. There you see the thread between the Pinots and the Merlots, and you will hear things about Sonoma Valley and Paso Roble, for example. Quite interesting how the Americans distinguish between the good quality and the bad quality red wine. Climate, a lot of text on this slide. Just make it in a nutshell. So there's Mr. Winkler. Winkler has been searching on the University of Davis, and he made a system splitting the regions in 5 sub-regions, region 1, region 2, up to region 5. And he was counting the degree days. So from April till October, when the wine is growing, those days having more than 10 degrees on average were summed up. And this formed a kind of scale. And the scale tells you exactly what kind of varieties you should plant there. So if you're region 1, which is the coolest region, you should plant Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. It's comparable with the Champagne or Chablis region. If you're in region 2, you should plant Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay or Merlot, which is comparable with the Bordeaux or Alsace region, and so on and so on and so on. So if you do this calculation and you know you are in the region 2 Winkler vineyard, then you know exactly which kind of grapes most likely going to give the best result. And region 1 to region 3 are considered to be the best regions. In this table, you can have a closer look what is all about, the meaning behind the region 1 to the region 5, how many temperatures some days are there, and so on and so on. So this is the original taken out of, in this case, of Wikipedia, but this is the original list. Here on this slide, you see the effect from the morning fogs. You know, San Francisco Bay is famous for the fogs they get every day. And these fogs, they are, of course, going into the inland, going into the Sonoma Valley, going into the Napa Valley, causing a special climate, cool air coming from the ocean, warm air coming from the inland. This fog is formed up there and giving a natural barrier against the sunlight. So it's more cool and more fresh to get the grapes from this region compared to any other region where the sun can shine from the very morning on until the late evening, which is not the case here in this region. The soil types, very diverse: sand, clay, loam, granite, volcanic, everything. You find almost everything. Even gravel soils are there just beside the river. Irrigation is needed as it's a dry, really dry region. But on the other hand, 25% of the vineyards are organic, biodynamic, and sustainable treated. The rootstocks, and this is one thing you have to remember when we talk about California, there was one famous rootstock which was developed in the mid-60s, the AXR1. And this was the rootstock which was really, really popular. End of the 90s, they found out that this rootstock is not phylloxera resistant. So they needed to replant a lot of vines out there. And this is the reason why the average age of wines in California is quite young compared to other regions. Today, they use SO4, 5BB, Paulson, 1103, all these rootstocks we know from our region as well. Vertical shoot positioning, trellising is the norm, nicely done vineyards. From the history, as said, the history does not date back to the before Christ times. We talk about the mid-18th century. Spanish missionaries were coming and arriving. The gold rush brought a huge growing wine scene in this area. Actually, a Hungarian guy, Agoston Haraszti, introduced the first European wines in California in 1852. Before that, it was Vitis Labrusca, the American varieties. And you see the growth. Napa, 1856, 225 acres, up to 1875, 25,000 acres. So if you divide this number by 2.5, so this would equal about 10,000 hectares. 24,664 equals 10,000 hectares roughly. And Mr. Abraham Lincoln, the President of the United States, was the first one to purchase and to serve Californian wine at his time in the White House. The first commercial winery built up in Sonoma in 1857, named Buena Vista. Nice name, I would say. And another highlight, beside Mr. Robert Parker, who gave high scores to the fully blown French oak, even 200% new French oak, dark wines, fleshy wines, was the Judgment of Paris in 1976. And you remember, I told you about these two wines in the very beginning, the 1973 Chateau Montelena and the Stags Leap Cabernet Sauvignon, 1973. They were part of the Judgment of Paris, organized by Stephen Spurrier. It was a competition between the most traditional French wines from Bordeaux and Burgundy, blue chip wines, Monteau Rothschild, Aubryon, and so on and so on. And Burgundy, the nicest white wine regions, Montrachet and so on, so Grand Cru sites, in competition with these Californian wines. And those two wines, they won the competition. And of course, the French did not accept the result, but this brought Californian wines up on the international picture. Grape varieties, as said, Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, Merlot are the traditional grape varieties for this region, plus Italians. And if you look back, the immigrants have been Spanish, Italians, Portuguese. And this history is following. Just look on the names. Mondavi, a big winery, Italian name. Gallo, Italian name. So this is where they come from. The white wine, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, some Riesling, Pinot Gris, but Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc are the most planted grapes there. Especially the Chardonnay, the Californian, the American style, with buttery and butterscotch, doing malolactic fermentation, oak aging. This was kind of a wow effect when this wine style came up. We are talking about wine styles. I was just talking about the wine style, the Chardonnay, barrel fermented and barrel aged. Of course, the reds, the bold reds are with French oak, with American oak. Both is used in California. Quite ripe fruit profile, ripe harvest of grapes is there. Sauvignon Blanc, I want to mention Mr. Robert Mondavi, who invented the Fumé Blanc, which is a Sauvignon Blanc in oak, in French oak, quite nicely. And the white Zinfandel, a rosé, a blush wine, developed in California just by accident, but it happened, a rosé wine with, kind of residual sugar in there, about 25 grams per liter. Very well adopted, and millions of cases sold today on this one. Viticulture, very ripe grapes harvested as to the climate. Cool temperature, controlled fermentation. Malolactic fermentation even for the whites, especially for the Chardonnay. Single vineyard wine bottlings are becoming more popular nowadays, and forward fruitiness is always key. So the first impression of the Californian wine is the fruit, and then the rest is coming, compared to the European wine, where you got the terroir, the sense of place, and then the fruit is coming. So this is one of the main differences to make it black and white and really simple. Specific wine terms, the AVA, I told you, so once an AVA is mentioned on the label, at least 85% of the grapes must be grown in this AVA. If California is there, 100% of the grapes has to come from California. If the variety is labeled, 75% has to be from this variety. In Europe, it's 85%. Yeah? Estate bottling means 100% of the grapes must come from the winery and needs to be within the specific AVA. This is clear. The alcohol level, the range on the label is plus minus 1.5 ABV instead of 0.5 in the European Union. What's important, I told you about the Judgment of Paris in 1976. Then the Rhone Rangers, this is a group of wine growers south of San Francisco, specialized on the Rhone Valley varieties. So on the white side, it's Viognier, Marsanne, and Roussanne. And on the red side, of course, it's Syrah, Grenache, Cinsault, Mourvèdre, you name it, all these nice varieties. And they build up the Rhone style of wines in the area. And one campaign I want to mention, the Gold State of Mind. It's a campaign for the international market, spending 2.5 billion, spending the money for getting 2.5 billion in export sales in the market over the next 10 years. A lot of supporting activities are done there. The investment is about 10 million US dollars in 2 years on this. And you can even go on the homepage and Google the Golden State of Mind campaign. There are online programs where you can virtually visit wineries, where you can educational seminars, everything like this. So the Golden State of Mind campaign is quite popular, and just have a look on the introduction video. It's really, really nicely done. It combines the emotions of the people, the land, the wines, everything together, and it's really emotional video. Leading producers, just a selection here. Of course, Beringer, one of them. Robert Mondavi is there. Stag Sleep Wine Cellar, Duckhorn Vineyards is there. Remoni Vineyard is there. Yeah, you name it. There are a lot more of to be named here. Very well known from Sonoma, from Napa Valley. But smaller ones are interesting as well. So if you're there, have a look, just jump in. They are more than willing to welcome you. Everybody's prepared for tasting. Yeah, it's worth going there. The labels, simple, quite simple, showing the AVA, the Napa Valley, for example, showing the variety, showing the brand, like Bear Food. By the way, Bear Food is the biggest brand existing in the world. Yeah, selling, I don't know, 40 million 9-liter cases each. And on the back label, what's typically for wines from California, beside the technical stuff, you always have a story telling you about, I don't know, the grandfather, the variety, the thinking of the wine grower behind this wine, whatever it is. But there is a story to be told with each and every wine sold. So California, a big wine region, the most important wine region from the US, and for sure one wine region which is leading the, let's say, the development of the whole wine world internationally in terms of wine styles and in terms of techniques due to the University of Davis in there. You have to be there once. I really can just encourage you to go there. Have a lot of fun being in California and drinking wines from California. Thanks. Bye-bye.